Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of season 2, episode 2 of Severance. Before we get into what happened this week on the show, we have to talk about some follow ups that people sent in on YouTube comments, as well as commenting at decodingtv.com to discuss what happened on last week's episode of Severance. At the very end of season 2, episode 1 of Severance, we do see a shot of Miss Casey alive. She is seemingly alive, being studied. And we got a lot of comments last week about there's like a still frame and Miss Casey is alive. And why did you talk about the still frame? And it's like, okay, like I understand now, Patrick. The bar is people want us to analyze these still frames, and we will. We're going to do it.
I will say in our defense, there's a couple of, at least one other moment in that episode where Adam Scott has he's like the show like cuts to a clip of her because he's thinking about her.
Right.
And in the moment watching the episode, I rewound. I was like, oh, I guess that's what's happening. It's like, oh, this is him just projecting like the trauma he's working through, and didn't think it. But you are correct. This is a show that, much like Westworld or Lost or others like it, invites you to scrutinize it further.
Lesson learned. We will be doing that from now on. But let's talk about what actually happened. But essentially, we see kind of Miss Casey's face on a screen. And we also see the words Cold Harbor at the top left corner of the screen. There seems to be like an image of some cells. There's also like a heartbeat monitor. And there are these like boxes on the bottom that say things like 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, and other sub boxes underneath those. There is letters that say like duration and a few other things, like IDNO, ITNO with numbers and then the words build next to them. So it's all very vague. And I want to present some of the theories around what exactly is going on here, right? On this week's episode of Severance, episode 2, we learned that Cold Harbor is a project of great importance to Lumen. According to Helena, quote, we need Mark S. back at work long enough to complete Cold Harbor, end quote. So what could Cold Harbor be? Well, there's many theories, but I think the best one is really laid out by this Esquire article by Josh Rosenberg, who writes Severance Season 2, What is Cold Harbor? And so Josh just like really does a great job of breaking down what the components of these elements on the screen are. So a lot of this information supports the popular fan theory that the severed floor is perfecting cloning technology. Goats are quite synonymous with cloning. It's not a huge jump to say that MDR certainly seems like they're identifying and sorting out abnormalities in genetic code. If you look even closer towards the top of the image of Mark's computer, you can read out ITNO colon 25.00 and then the words build in parentheses. Our best guess is that this stands for iteration number 25, which Mark S is currently 68% of the way through building. There are also 5 sorting bins at the bottom of the screen, each labeled with 4 categories: WO, DR, FC, and MA. Many eagle-eyed Severance fans have already connected these to a quote from Lumen Industries founder Keir Egan, as he states in season 1, each man's character is defined by the precise ratio that resides in him of woe, frolic, dread, and malice. He named these 4 principles his tempers. There's also a scene in which Miss Cobell reads from Egan saying, including the quote, tame me in the tempers 4, that I may serve thee forevermore. Is it possible that sorting the correct ratio of these tempers is essential to the severed floor's work? Are they crafting artificial intelligence for cloning purposes, or perhaps even creating a soul, end quote? Now, this article then goes on to point out that during an interview, and there's like a YouTube video on Entertainment Weekly where they ran fan theories by the cast of Severance. And one of the theories people says is like what they're is Miss Casey a clone? Like, is what Lumen Industries doing cloning? And Adam Scott said, this sounds like what Lumen would be doing in a super boring version of Severance, end quote. And I remember watching that and being like, oh, wow, that seems like a really clear sign that they're not doing cloning. Because why would he say that's such a harsh critique of this very reasonable fan theory? Now, having seen what happened this week on the episode of the show, having studied this Cold Harbor image in more detail, I think he's just trying to throw people off the trail. Like, that seems like something you would say to make people think that it's not the case, because it's so harsh and disdainful. You know
How
what
would
I
a
mean?
comedian, and also he's a comedian, right? Like he's
Right.
able to operate in different tones than you and
Right.
I, and
Yeah.
that very much seems like the kind of one where he's using the full range of his acting abilities, like to summon this disdain for a theory that very well might be, especially if they've set again, we talked about this. Who's to say, when you say we know how it's going to end, I take that with a grain of salt. But if you accept it as like they know generally, if not specifically, where this is all going, and cloning was involved, like that's something that would be known to probably, someone like Adam Scott, right? Like about like where is this character going? Like how does this inform the broader world? Suspect that he would be aware. This doesn't seem like, I've got no impression of the way that Ben Stiller and the other creatives have talked about. Like this doesn't seem like a kind of show where like we're keeping everybody in the dark while they make the show and they don't actually know it's like, it doesn't seem like that kind of show.
Right.
So I think it's very reasonable to interpret Adam Scott's response as maybe that's not the totality of like what's happening here, but that's a clear component, especially for Mark's character.
You could imagine that if Adam Scott heard like literally the exact answer, he'd be like, "Well, that sounds boring. That sounds dumb. Why would
it's
would
kind of
that
like a
be the
parent
truth?"
does. Like I parry stuff like that all the time with
example Patrick Klepek.
Like you have to get off your tablets. You're on your phone. Like, well, you know what I mean? Like you're just like trying to judo chop like hypocrisy and sort of like obvious statements. And so I have a deep sympathy if like all of that is true of like, I've been caught in a pickle. How do I come up with a fun lie that gets me out of this one?
Here's how I get out of it: telling you you're stupid.
Yes,
that's the
go
plan.
do your homework, 8-year-old. As I scroll through an algorithm.
All right, so it seems very possible that Cold Harbor is about cloning.
Also, Cold Harbor, if she truly, and we'll get into this in what happens in episode 2, but like, if she's dead, Cold Harbor, like, you know what I mean? Like, if she's in sort of cold stasis, like her body, like I could imagine, like, what it's a way of extending life through death, and like the Cold Harbor could be like a way of representing the status of the individual that is being, it's being enacted upon.
It would explain a lot of things. Like this one theory would explain why Miss Casey acts so weird. Like maybe because it's not really. Mark has seen. We learned this week that Mark has seen his wife, like had to ID her body. So it's like, what it solves that problem too. Like how would there be Miss Casey? Maybe it's not. Basically, maybe it's not actually Mark's wife on the Severance floor, right?
Yeah.
It's like
different. It ties so thematically in what is like Severance is about many things, but like sense of self, and is like a huge part of that. And cloning would like directly tie into identity, sense of self, what makes us us. Like it would just be a natural extension of all of that.
So people have been speculating on this on the Severance subreddit. A user named I Like Apple3 wrote the following: I believe that MDR is refining data to help Lumen make a clone of Kier. Looking for scary numbers is a way to develop the clone's sense of emotion, while sorting them into 4 categories is a way to train his basic problem-solving skills and also develop his emotion. At the end of Season 2, Episode 1 of Severance, we see a computer screen with Miss Casey on it. You see the text ITNO 25 build. I think they're using Miss Casey as a prototype before trying to clone Kier, making sure everything is stable before they try to go through with it. IT means iteration, NO means number. This could also explain why Miss Casey isn't allowed to leave, because Lumen could be afraid that testing could mess with the transition between her innie and outie, end quote. I think probably they don't want her to leave because they don't want her to bump into her husband. But, there's other reasons as well. So I thought that was a very solid theory. Like, they're trying to make a clone of Kier, and Miss Casey is a prototype build. And now, why was it Miss Casey? Why did they choose somebody who was also the wife of somebody who was on the severed floor? Still open questions. And if you have your theories about that, feel free to let us know. Patrick Klepek, any other thoughts on what Cold Harbor might be?
No, but it it's interesting to be in a place where whether this is true or not, it's fun to be in a place for the show where you can feel like the theories can land somewhere. Where like we have enough information that I'm sure there'll be twists and turns. Like some version of this could be right, but a whole bunch of it isn't. But it's fun to be at a place in a show where you feel they're giving you enough information that doesn't feel like it's not all just trying to throw you off the scent. Like it does feel like the show is planting seeds for you. Like if you're smart, if you want to be part of online communities, that like, hey, you can get a little ahead of some of the stuff that we're doing or have a sense of like where some of this might be going. And as long as I always get frustrated in shows that lay those seeds just to create a head fake. Like would be frustrating. Like that's a lot of the Westworld struggled with this in its second season with its relationship with the online sort of detective community trying to decode what was going on. I think it led to a lot of problems in that second season. I'm not getting a sense of that here. This feels like fun and good, and it's a sense of play that really only exists in like this era of television where creators are so cognizant of the fact that like people are going to be like checking this stuff out and talking about it, that you can have a relationship with different versions of your audience. Like 99% of people watching Severance aren't scanning through that. But if you are, it's some really fun stuff.
I also got to say, I just like in general how subtly these mysteries are introduced, right? Like it's a brief screenshot at the end. It's a mention of Cold Harbor. They're not like, you don't need to focus on the mystery if you enjoy the other aspects of the show.
It doesn't call attention to it, right? It's like different than, and again, I adored Lost, but like the way Lost would do that is like, you'd be in a normal scene and then like, the focus would change to, a picture, and it would go like, like, there'd be weird noise. Like, you should be paying attention to this little thing that we're not going to explain, which was your signal to then go online and like read Doc Jensen on like Entertainment Weekly's like 7-page analysis of the new episode. This is much more subtle and learns a lot of lessons from these like shows that have existed in this similar mold, and I continue to have faith in the creators in the show, and that is an exciting place to be.
Those are our thoughts on Cold Harbor. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. You can also email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.